My friend Earl Davis was one of the friendliest people I've ever met. He told me this story. He was driving through Los Angeles and he and his wife Jean got lost. They wandered around for a bit and then they wandered into an extremely difficult part of the city. Earl pulled over, rolled down the window, got out a map. This is before GPS. And he was looking at the map, trying to figure out where to go, when a young man came up next to the window with a gun, pointed at Earl, and said, "Give me your money." Earl did this. "Friend, we're lost. We're trying to get here, and we're not quite sure where we are." Well, the young man looked at him, looked at the map, and then he did this. "Well, here's what you do. You got to get over here, then you head over, go to the light, turn left, and once you get there, you'll know you're good to go." Earl said, "Thank you," and he sped off. Now here's the thing about Earl, and by the way, I'm not recommending you do that every time in that situation. But when Earl said friend, he meant it. It wasn't dependent on what the other person was doing. What kind of friends do you have in your life? When it comes to interpersonal relationships, enjoy the journey.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is afternoon today when we are here talking about interpersonal relationships. If you were with us on Tuesday, sorry, today is Tuesday. If you were with us on Sunday, then you will recall that we had some technical difficulties that caused us to have to stop recording. I don't even know if it was yet even mid-session, but thankfully, we can come back together now, and whether you're watching this live or watching the recording later, I am so grateful that you have chosen to join us. Today is a replay or redo, take two of interpersonal relationships, day 6, interpersonal relationships. And as you heard in the video, there's something wonderful and healthy about relationships that can even have the power to shift a scenario from what could have possibly been really, really bad to something that ended up being quite unexpectedly beautiful. And so I am grateful today to have a guest join us for this discussion. And before I introduce him and bring him on, just a reminder, so today is technically day 8, the last day of our 8 days. And so tonight we will meet again at 7 p.m. I hope you can make it then. And tonight will be our last day because it's day 8. So be sure that as you're watching, you're commenting, you're letting me know that you're there so that you can be entered to win one of our giveaways. All right. Now, there is one giveaway. I'm not sure if I shared it with you already, and so I'll share it with you now. Maybe I shared it on the very first day. But either way, if I can grab it, here we go. I think, am I grabbing it? Almost. Bear with me, folks. One of our giveaways, well, wouldn't you know, somehow it's not here on my desk. Can I blame my children for this, even though they haven't been up here? I don't think so. Well, it's a large magnet, and maybe if I put my eyes on it later in our time together, I'll share it with you. But it's such a huge magnet that reminds you every time you look at it, whether it's on your fridge or somewhere else, magnetic, it reminds you of the commitment that you've made to your health. And so I hope that whether it's that or whether it's one of the cards, tonight's topic will be nutrition, as you see on this one, that have quick tips, whatever it may be. I hope that you will let me know you're here so that I can be sure to give you a giveaway. Now, without further ado, let me introduce our speaker for today. And I'm just going to kind of off the cuff it so that I don't have to rummage through my notes. Richard McNeil is a pastor and has a passion for creative ministry. I've seen that through various endeavors that he has committed to, that he has pursued, and it is a blessing to see that in action. So often we kind of get stuck in the normal things of life, and not all normal things are bad by any means. But there's something to be said for using that creative spark that God has planted in each of us. And I truly believe that each of us has something. Just listen to kids as they play, as they imagine. And Richard is living out his creative spark in the work that he does. He has a passion for people, and that is one of the reasons why I asked him to join us during one of these 8 days. And I'm glad that he chose, or that it worked out for him to do, interpersonal relationships. So without further ado, Richard, welcome to day 6 on day 8 of our first steps to better health. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. And I'm thankful once again to be here. And hey, it's double portion.
There you go. There you go. Extra blessings for all of us. Because I really do believe, even just having this conversation, whether we've thought about this a lot or not, there's something about having conversations about topics that are meaningful that even in the moment develop such growth. I know I've been experiencing that these 8 days, and I can point to each night, each lesson, each principle, and speak to something that I have learned, and something that has sort of been reaffirmed. So thank you for joining this conversation.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I'm I'm going to, I mean, I'll come to the questions that we had been going through on Sunday, but I kind of want to jump off of what Chris Blake said in that video, or question that he asked toward the end of, what kind of friends do you have? What kind of, relationships do you have? And so I'd love for you to talk about the interpersonal relationships that you have, that you deeply treasure, and
Hmm.
why.
All right. Well, I have several interpersonal relationships, right? I have some very close friends. Even though we're very close, we're miles upon miles away. They're distance-wise, they're far away from me, but we talk regularly. One very close friend of mine, his name is Baldwin, right? And one of the reasons why I cherish the relationship that we have is because even though I'm a pastor and he is not, I can be very vulnerable with him. I can
Mm,
talk through my feelings with him, and it's not like he's not going to elevate me and put me on a pedestal per se and
mm-hmm,
expect unrealistic things from me. So I
mm-hmm,
can truly open up to him. Another friend of mine, his name is Kevin, and yes, I can open up and I can share with him and I can be myself with him. And being vulnerable, being able to share my emotions with another male, another individual, it is very therapeutic. It is very
mm-hmm,
therapeutic, and what makes these relationships that I have, first we started out as very social, play basketball, play football together, but eventually we got even deeper, is because we share our love for Jesus Christ together, right? And
mm-hmm,
that shared relationship with Jesus, we now can then share in our struggles with each other. We can
mm-hmm,
be vulnerable, like, hey, listen, yeah, Jesus is working on you, and guess what? He's working on me, and there's some things, and we started to open up, and in sharing our shared struggles, and some
mm-hmm,
struggles are not shared, but we can still sympathize and empathize with each other. By
mm-hmm,
going through that, it deepened our friendship, it deepened our bond, that even though we are miles away,
mm-hmm,
miles away, we're still extremely close. I know
mm-hmm,
I can pick up the phone and call, and bam, these individuals are there for me, and they'll listen and they'll truly care about what I'm going through. So yes, interpersonal relationships are absolutely key. And I'll say this other thing concerning that is that these relationships that we have, that I have, and that I share with these two that I've mentioned. Of course, I have a few more, right? Is because of the redemptive aspect of it. Our interpersonal relationships are not just surface level. It is
Mm.
actually to help each of us grow in our walk with Jesus Christ. Literally, we're
Mhm.
being saved by being friends.
Mhm. Mhm.
For to sum it up, we are truly guiding and saving each other by being friends with each other. So so for anyone listening on, I'll say this: if the friendships that you have, if they're not helping to cultivate your relationship with God or leading you to God, then they're actually leading you in another direction. And that
Mhm.
may be something you may want to reevaluate. Especially with your theme, it's all about creation, right?
Mhm.
And I love the theme, by the way. Love it. That's why I'm glad to be here, right? And I love all the various aspects of creation. From when we look at the creation account in Genesis, we see that God is literally solving a problem by creating,
Right.
right? So our interpersonal relationships, they're literally what God recommends. He says it is not good to be alone because
Mm.
he knew that throughout our life stages we would need each other.
Mhm. Mhm. Man, that's to say that like God's recommendation is for us to be in a relationship, right? It's like I
Mhm.
picture God, coming to God just like, God, you know, what should I do? This and this is happening. And he's just like, I recommend that you invest in some interpersonal relationships. You know, and
Yeah.
and I can only imagine there are times during any of our interpersonal relationships, even our close friendships, where there's conflict.
Mm.
And it may feel as if, maybe this is the time to opt out of relationship.
Yes.
How have you found yourself working through conflict with those that you're close to? What has been helpful for you in order to not simply move past the issue, but move through the issue?
And I love the way you put that. Put to go through the issue, right? And I think that at the heart of conflicts is unmet expectations, especially
Mm,
when it comes to our core values as individuals,
mm-hmm.
right? So in relationships, interpersonal relationships that you will have with others, it's always important to reevaluate your core values or even remind individuals, now, do you not value this, or do you not value,
Mm,
restate what your expectations are, what you
mm-hmm.
are looking for in a relationship, and how said individual might be violating that, right?
Mm,
Not
mm-hmm.
be violating it from just your own personal, well, I am offended or I am hurt. Not only there, but also reevaluating and showing that, listen, by you violating this particular core value, you're hurting yourself,
Yeah.
right? So interpersonal relationships, or just relationships in general, right? It's important that we do not approach them just selfishly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are times when we may say, you know what, I don't want to associate with this person anymore because, you know, I just don't feel like it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then becomes very self-centered. But
Mm-hmm.
will you're still remaining connected with that person be redemptive and helpful to them? You may want to evaluate that, right? And this is
Mm-hmm.
why getting at the core value is so important, right? Let's say, for instance, you value quality time and
Yeah.
you want to spend time with the other individual and you realize that they're always just blowing you off, right?
Mm,
Now, in stating to them and addressing that, you say, listen, I really value spending time with you. I
mm-hmm.
really
Mm-hmm.
value that time that we can share together. Do you share in that regard? Do you share in that perspective? Do you also value that? Do you still value that? Right?
Mm,
Because we connect, right? So as you restate that, it gives the other individual an opportunity to then share and say yes or no.
mm-hmm.
And from that, I do want to state this: there are some moments, some very painful moments, when
Yeah.
you will have to, you know what, we're going to go through this, but we're going to come out on different sides of it.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
you understand where my perspective is, and I understand clearly where you are. We're not at
Right.
odds with each other. We're just
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily going on the same path, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I think there is a healthy way of addressing that, of
Mm-hmm.
conflict because they do come. And conflicts are not an indicator of lack of health in a relationship. Conflict,
Mm,
uh, conflict is a turning point of growth in a relationship. And
mm-hmm,
oftentimes, individuals, they may grow at different rate. So if someone is not growing at the same rate as you may divert, right?
mm-hmm,
It's like a
mm-hmm,
plant. Certain aspects, certain branches grow a little bit shorter, some grow taller and longer. That's
mm-hmm.
okay. All in this still together. You can still call me. We can still talk from time to time. We may not be connecting on the same level. So
Mm-hmm.
that is very important to understand that just because you're having a conflict or you're having a disagreement with someone, it doesn't mean that you're at odds with them or that, oh, we're now enemies. It just means that,
Right.
okay, we just need to reevaluate some of our core values here.
Mm-hmm. That's such a it's such a mature reality.
Mm,
I almost feel like saying you haven't had real mature friendships until until you hit one of those points at which you have to ask that question of just like, whew, okay, what are our core values? What are our expectations in this relationship? Which for some of us, I think automatically sounds like, but we're not married. Like, why do we have to go so deep, right?
hmm
But but it's real because life gets more complicated. Different things happen, right? You're no longer in college or wherever it was that you first met, where you're just sort of free floating and whatnot. Uh, so as you shift, expectations shift, people do change, and so yeah, you eventually get to that point, and it's hard. Oh man, sorry, just reflecting on my own experience with that.
Yeah.
It's hard, it's messy, but it's part of the journey. It's
And I
part of the
think
journey.
the word you used there, you said it's messy. You said
Hmm.
it's messy. And and I think the deeper you get with someone, the more of their mess is going to rub off on you, and the more of your mess is going to rub off on them, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
and you know, I'm a bit of a neat freak, but I'll say this: the more comfortable you are with the mess,
Hmm.
the more at peace you will be in a relationship, right? And
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
like to kind of throw it back a little bit there. Notice with the video that you shared at the very intro, right, where that's a volatile situation, but
Yes.
yet still the other gentleman in the car, he was like, friend, I'm having this issue. He literally was like, listen, I'm not even gonna let the toxicity of this situation
Yeah,
ruin my
yeah,
perspective. He was still
yeah.
able to, in the midst of that mess, say, "Hey, listen, I need you to be a friend right now, and this is my problem. This is what I'm going through, right? And
Right, right.
this is what's needed, where we can actually accept, like, okay, I know you are a very irresponsible person, but you're still my friend, and I love you. I don't love the way you act sometimes, but I still
Right.
love you.
Mhm.
But this is what I need. This is what we're gonna do right now because this
Yeah.
was for both of our growth, right?
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
using that example of the video that was shared earlier, guess what? In that moment, by the perspective of the gentleman in the car, by saying, "You know what, friend, I'm lost." He stated, and he was a bit vulnerable in that moment. It actually
Yeah.
dropped the guard of the person that was seeking to rob him,
Right.
right? And here's the beauty of interpersonal relationships, right? Even if there's just surface, just starting out, by your mere intentionality, you're then able to change the trajectory of the other person. Notice
Mhm.
the man in the car changed the trajectory of the person from being a robber
Mhm.
to now being a guide.
Mm.
And that's
That's wild.
change, right? So it lets us know that, listen, every relationship that we have an opportunity to be either a rebel or a redeemer. We have the
Yeah.
opportunity to be a
Yeah.
deliverer or a destroyer. Literally,
Mercy.
we are redeeming each other by our associations. We tend to think of the gospel as, oh, I need to go preach to that person. No, you just need to be in relationship with them.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
When we read in the gospel, and I'm not trying to preach or anything, but when we look at John, it literally says that the word became human. God became human Why?
Mhm.
Not to preach at us, but to dwell with us.
Mhm.
He
Mhm.
wanted to come
Mhm.
live and be in a relationship with us.
Mhm.
I love to do it. I love to do this in Genesis, where it says, "It is not good for man to be alone." Guess what? God was also saying it is not good for him to be alone as well, because
Yeah.
we are created in His image.
Right.
God desired to be in a relationship so much with us that He became one of us.
Mhm.
That's how
Mhm.
much He
Mhm.
desired to be in relationship with us. So
Yeah.
as we're going through life, anytime that we have this inclination to isolate ourselves from others, or to, nah, you know what, I don't want to bother with people just keep disappointing me, the moment we
Yeah.
start to have that perspective, we're realizing we're actually going on a path that is also detrimental to ourselves.
Mhm. Mhm.
We Interpersonal relationships is, to me, this is just my opinion, is one of the most important aspects to health.
Yes.
The most important, because we actually see that isolation and personal neglect are things that are used to torture individuals,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
punish individuals. One of the
Mhm.
greatest punishment is solitary confinement,
Mhm.
and that's reserved for the worst of all criminals. I believe that we do ourselves a great disservice when we voluntarily
Yeah.
confine ourselves. We
Yeah.
should gravitate towards connecting with others as much as
Mhm.
possible.
Mhm. Mhm. Whew. Richard, this is rich. Um, I I want to jump to one of the questions that we touched on Sunday.
All right.
Um, well, let me. There was actually there was a quote from our book that I feel just totally correlates with what you just shared. It says,
All
according
right.
to research, having someone in your life who really cares for you, which we could unpack what cares for you means. So having someone in your life who really cares for you, feels close to you, loves you, or wants to help you can significantly lower your risk of premature death and disease. I mean, you
Yes.
said you think it's one of the most important. Yes, 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 it is. The fact that interpersonal relationships, uh, specifically this kind of trusted space, can actually help us not to die sooner, right?
Yes.
Can actually help us to ward off disease, and um, and I automatically see a connection between the healthy interpersonal relationships we have and the choices we make, right?
Yes.
So when we actively choose to be in relationship with others, when we have relationships that are good, where there's good, um, what's the word, accountability,
Mhm.
where there's mutual care and respect,
Yes.
all of that stuff, then we have someone we can confide in, someone that we can be vulnerable with, like you talked about with your friendships. Um, and as a result of just those pieces, when we have choices we have to make, we have sounding boards that we know will be healthy. We know that, hey, if I do this thing that's not good for me, even in a moment of desperation, there are people who love me that don't want me going down this path, right? Like, it's so connected to choice and the abilities that we have to make healthy choices. So talk more about, and I'll put the word creation up on the screen,
All right.
so that we can all kind of see the word together and kind of remember what all the letters stand for. But C is, so we have choice, rest, environment.
Lost audio there. I hope that you can hear me, but I cannot hear you. Still, still cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, but I can't hear you.
Oh. Oh no.
um, come on.
Can you?
Nope, can't hear you. Can read lips somewhat, but can't hear you. Man, Richard, we definitely are supposed to have this conversation. That is certain. We are supposed to have this conversation. Um, come hell or high water. Um,
Wow. I'm
okay,
surprised.
now, talk now.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Oh man, say something again.
How about now? Better?
Like I see the. Oh man, I'm not even sure what to troubleshoot here. Let me look at my
Oh,
audio. Um, everything looks normal and fine.
yeah.
Do you want to?
Shows fun of mine.
I'm gonna kick you out and then join back in, okay?
Okay.
Okay, folks, if you're watching and you can hear us, would you please comment? If you can hear me, please comment. There's something funky going on, and I don't know what it is. Okay, Richard, I'm gonna bring you back in.
All right. Can you
All
hear me
right.
now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I cannot hear you.
Oh, what is going on?
Um, what else could it be? 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 Speak now.
Can you hear me now?
It's picking you up, but somehow I can't hear you, which I don't understand at all. Let me. And see. Okay, speak now.
I, I can still
Oh,
hear you.
ah,
Can you hear me?
yes, I can.
Good, good.
We're back. I only God
All
knows. Okay. Um, I can't remember what was being said.
Well, it all started while we were going over the acronym of creation. We were breaking
Okay.
down what each stands for: choice, rest, environment, so forth.
Yes. Okay. So my question for you was, how do you see, in light of what we've talked about the health, how having healthy interpersonal relationships impacts the rest of life. How do you see interpersonal relationships impacting these other aspects of our health, whether it's choice, rest, environment, activity, trust in God, outlook, or nutrition? What are some of the connections that you see?
Oh wow. Well, I think interpersonal relationships actually is the catalyst or the connecting line through
Okay.
all aspects of it. And I'll start with choice. Studies have shown where psychologists and doctors they're showing the interlink between addiction, even strong drug addictions, and how by having good, healthy relationships, it then deters the individual from making bad choices.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so the cure for addiction is actually not so much of the oh you need to abstain from. It's actually by having better relationships, it then reduces the triggers that then drives you to the addiction,
Mhm.
right? So in better relationships, yes, it does help you to make better choices. Like, it will influence you saying, you know what, I don't want to make that choice because it's going to hurt someone else that I love,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the interpersonal interventions that happened, that also helps, right?
Yeah.
Even when it comes to rest, we rest easier when our minds and heart, when we're emotionally healthy, when we're emotionally well, when we feel loved,
Mm-hmm.
we feel loved by others. Lonely people tend to struggle a lot with insomnia, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
the health connections there are immense. Being out in think of environment. The more in our environments that we're spending with others, right? It's good to be out in nature and everything, but when we're doing that with other people, nothing beats that. It's the
Yeah.
most beautiful thing, especially when you can go out in nature with your family, those that are intrinsically close to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if active, for me personally, and I could be more biased with this one. I love to be active with others. In exercising and being active by myself, I'm not the best. I'm not the best with that. But if I can do it with someone else, oh, 100%, I'm there. I love it. So you know, so as you go through each of the various acronyms, all the various steps along the way, yes, by doing it with someone else, it is always going to be better. Always going to be
Mm-hmm.
better. Like the Bible says, a three-rung cord is always stronger than a one strand, right?
Right.
So our lives, the more we can do it with someone else in partnership, the better it will be. And we
Yeah.
see this with when we think of the successful companies out there, the
Mm-hmm.
great startups, very few of them are started by just one individual.
It's true. Yeah.
Often there is at least one other person there, and we had a small team, but then it grew, right? And the same
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is where people grow deeper, more connected, more meaningful lives in small groups, in groups with others. So
Mm-hmm.
we definitely need that interpersonal relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's this is such a good conversation, and um I wish maybe we need to talk about relationships more, and
Yes.
not just marriage or not just dating. Like when we think about having conversations about relationships, specifically in the context of church life, those are
Mhm.
the spaces, it's the romantic relationships that
Mm.
we focus on. We don't often just talk about interpersonal in general. And I think these are some of the conversations we need to be having kind of all along the way. Um, I mean, maybe my 4 and 6 year old can't quite have these conversations, but to a degree, yes. Um,
Yeah.
the other day, well, a few weeks ago now, we were reading a book. There's a kid's Bible book that we were reading. It highlights different Bible stories, but really does a great job of connecting all the stories to the large redemption story.
Okay.
And anyway, after each story, there are questions for the kids to reflect on, and then there's a prayer. And so one of the questions, I can't remember what the story was now, but I'll never forget this moment we had with our kids where one of the questions was, do you have friends who help you make good decisions?
Mm.
And both of my girls, I mean, I wasn't fully expecting my 4 year old to, like run with that question per se, but I was expecting my 6 year old to, because she's thoughtful and she's very perceptive.
Mm.
And Richard, I couldn't believe it. Like, um, my 4 year old was quick to say, no, but I helped so and so, and she named she named the friend. I said I have helped so and so not to fight. I was just like, what? And then
Wow.
and then my 6 year old was just like, no, I don't have any. I was just like, you know. So I think we spent a bit of time. Hopefully my face didn't look like that, but I think we spent a bit of time talking about what it means to be a good friend. And what I really wanted to say as a parent was just like, we need to get you some new friends. um, because I know from parent teacher conferences that she's the person who is often helping others work it out. Okay, so if and I've seen her in action with her sister and another friend. She
Yes.
is the one to step in and say, "Okay, so what happened?" And
Mhm.
she's 6, you know? And so she uses all this energy to help guide others, and I'm like, you need someone on your level who's also helping guide you, who's also encouraging you.
Yes.
How can we do that? Who can I tap into? What families are there in my area who have the same age and maturity level that I can just be like, can our children connect? Because I need my child to see what that looks like now. She can't wait till 20 something to understand what healthy interpersonal relationship looks like. So, from a parent standpoint, um, how how do you find yourself modeling for your children healthy interpersonal relationships, teaching them about interpersonal relationships? How do you find yourself in that space?
That's a very, very good question. A very challenging one too, because you know, even as an adult, I'm still processing through that, right?
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
oh, it's not an easy thing, right? Where
right.
the heart of it is teaching your children how to communicate what their needs are to others,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Where
yeah.
as adults we tend to be guarded with that,
Mm-hmm.
where it's okay in teaching your child to know it's okay to share with others, right? And to be able to share and
Yeah.
to share in a healthy way. You know, one of the things that my wife and I does with discipling our children and guiding them is as they interact with other children, right? They're able to recognize the choices that other children are making, and then to also personally evaluate, is that
Mm.
what you is that so that way they're setting their own core values. What things do they value in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what relationships, by associating with this child, playing with this child, does that help you? Is that also fostering that same core value with you? So along those lines, that's what we've been able to do with our children, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
as we bring the question, you stated, that even for adults and even in just a larger context of the conversation about relationships, right? We tend to only think of it in more the lines of marriage, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think when it comes to these types of conversations, it's important to teach individuals how to articulate what they desire, what your expectations are.
Yeah.
Communicate that,
Yeah.
right? Oftentimes we can communicate. We may communicate emotions, where we communicate anger, we communicate joy, but we don't actually communicate what exactly is causing the anger, or what exactly is actually bringing you joy. You just
Mm-hmm.
stay happy right now, or you're just stating that you're angry, you're frustrated right now, right? How can you better communicate? Oh man, I'm really enjoying this because of this, this, and this. It really
Mm-hmm.
brings out this, this, and this in my life, so that
Mm-hmm.
others who share with that can, yes, I like that too. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I value that as well. And then
Mm-hmm.
you can come together based on that commonality
Right.
and grow together, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's the same way with our children, finding that common. Yes, we can be friends with Johnny or Sally or Tom or whomever, because we like playing with these things, because we like that, right? Same
Mm-hmm.
thing for adults. Finding the core values that are common between the two, because then it will help you further on, right? Because then if it's based on a core value, it's not based on emotions. It's
Mm-hmm.
not based on how you may feel in a specific moment, but
Mm-hmm.
even the moment, right?
Right. Right.
At core, it goes deeper. At a core value, sits and resonates more with you. You
Mm-hmm.
know, part of the reason why I even stopped to stress this a little bit is because even for us as ministers, I'm being a little bit vulnerable here. Even for us as ministers, you mentioned with your daughter, she will help other children, right? She
Mm-hmm.
will come, she'll give assistance, she'll like guide them along. But when she was asked whether or not, do you have any close friends that you can confide in, her her answer was no. right? And for us as ministers, we are often being of service to others. We're giving counsel, we're giving guidance, we're praying for others, we're ministering to others. But who do we turn to?
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's important for even for us as ministers to also seek out other individuals that share in those core values.
Right.
Now, that's not always easy.
Mhm.
Matter of fact, it's more it's more difficult than anything because of stereotypes, because of different barriers, different things that people have,
Yep.
because of, oh, but that's your profession, that's your title, that's so they kind of keep you at length,
Yep.
keep you at,
Yep.
right? So it's a lot more difficult, and sometimes we have to go outside of our current sphere of influence.
Yeah.
You might have to reach out to other people, and and hence why even for me, some of my closest friends are miles away, you know.
Mhm.
But it still does not take away from the close interpersonal relationships that we can cultivate with those in our proximity. We still
Mhm.
have to work.
Yeah. Yeah. We do. And I think um one of the things that this pandemic has highlighted is
Mm.
whether or not we have friends in close proximity. You know?
So so
I
true.
mean, if
Yep.
if more than likely, and I mean, some people based on where they live, like they're literally a mile from their next neighbor, maybe they're on a farm, like that's a reality for some people, or that the way that their subdivision is set up, it's just not set up easily for natural kind of connection. Like when you walk outside of your house, you're not really going to see people. Or my husband and I used to live in a townhouse where just the way it was built was not made for connection. I mean, it was a cookie cutter neighborhood, and you've got your door to the garage, and so you go through that door. The front door is kind of tucked back, so far back from the road, and you're really only coming out to get into your car unless you're a walker or a runner. Like it just it just wasn't set up for connection. Anyway,
Yes.
coming back to the pandemic, some people experienced extreme loneliness, not because they didn't have friends, but because they didn't have friends in close proximity.
Yes.
There's nothing like being able to talk to someone in the flesh, even 6 feet apart, even with a mask on. There's
Yes.
nothing like being able to talk to someone in the flesh. And I was so thankful that early on when we moved here, and we've been here now 3.5 years, we got to know one of our neighbors in particular, a couple that has two kids, that are just younger than my two kids. It's kind of like stair step, mine, theirs. And they play
Okay.
together, they have a great time together. And at some point during the pandemic, we decided, hey, we'll we'll be together, not in each other's homes, but they can play in the yards together, that sort of thing.
Yes.
If we hadn't had that,
Mm.
especially earlier on where, the kids aren't in school, um, like, they're not getting that connection. Church, initially was online, and then even when for my church, we, started doing a drive-in service, even then, you're like, the kids just they weren't getting that interpersonal from those spaces that they're used to getting it from. So if we hadn't known our neighbors and weren't comfortable with our neighbors, our kids would have been in a very different scenario. How in I mean, we're basically out of time, but how how can we do better in cultivating relationships that are up close? Maybe what are some of the barriers to that we need to kick down?
Mm.
How can we do better? Because this too, even if these aren't close relationships, confiding relationships, they're still important relationships. How can we do better?
Um. All right. Well, you asked even what are some of the barriers, right?
Yeah,
And I believe the comfort of life and even technology, just being honest,
yeah.
has become a major barrier to how the quality of our connections,
Mhm.
right? Like for instance, we have taken for granted the fact that, oh, because we have technology, oh, I can always text someone, I can always call someone, even though they're far away, I can connect, right? So that is also that has caused us to not value as much the in the flesh kind of connections, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, yeah, the pandemic really just highlighted all of that, right? That our relationships were really shallow,
Yeah.
and we need those deeper connections, and we need that face to face, right? One of the ways I think that we can combat this, or to work on this at a deeper level, is by changing our lifestyles.
Mhm.
Changing our lifestyles. It needs to happen from our day to day actions, what we do. Like I'll give an example. For the modern family today, the modern individuals in your homes, when you're leaving your home, start with when you're leaving, you get in your car, which is also inside your garage. So it's
Mhm.
actually inside. Get in your car, open your garage door, you drive out. So you
Mhm.
actually don't see your neighbors necessarily. You drive out, you drive to work, so you're enclosed in your car, drive for several miles, get to your to building, pull into a parking garage or a park, right? And get out of the vehicle into the building for work, back into the car, and do the same thing. So when it comes to close proximity to even those that live in your neighborhood, you mentioned your neighbor. For most Americans, for most of us as individuals, we are not that close with with our neighbors,
Mhm.
unless we are intentional because of lifestyle. Now you notice you mentioned children.
Right.
The connection for you was through the children. The children
Mhm.
will, and through that, as parents, you found out commonality, right?
Right.
So you're intentional on, you possibly were intentional on like setting up play dates, right? To make sure the kids are playing together. And while the kids are playing together, hey, let's connect, let's talk, right? So
Mhm.
that fosters a relationship.
Right.
What about children?
Right. Yeah.
So you have to. So now you have to switch up your lifestyle. You have to be extra intentional on. Hey, listen. You know what? Let me go. Let me go reach out to that neighbor. Hey, what are you in? What are you into? You play softball? You play baseball? You play soccer? You know, finding that area of commonality. Whether you know whether it's a women's group. You know, hey, let's start a book club or something. You know, find that common interest with others so that you have at least one area of commonality that you can connect with and
Mhm.
foster. Be intentional on, hey, how's it going? Hey, are we still meeting for that book club? Be consistent in
Mhm.
your time. Being consistent with reaching out. These are the things that will help to foster healthy, viable relationships moving forward. Because without intentionality, without being consistent, it will fall apart.
Yeah.
It will literally fall apart. It won't last. And
Yeah.
we all need lasting relationship. Just like as we're going through creation, right? If
Mhm.
you only rest only only a few nights out of the week and you don't get proper rest continuously, you will get sick. You know,
Yep.
if you
Yep.
exercise consistently and regularly, guess what? You will get sick. The same thing with our relationships. If we're not consistent, if we're not continually, intentionally seeking out healthy connections with others, guess
Mhm.
what? You'll get sick. And the sickness may show itself in depression,
Yep.
anxiety,
Mhm.
all different disorders, personality disorders, they will manifest themselves if we're not intentional. So this is
Mm.
very important.
It is. It is. It's critical. Richard, thank you. Thank you, thank you. I know your schedule is busy, and so I don't want to hold you anymore, but I want to thank you again and again and again for making time for this take two. And I want to thank those of you who joined us throughout these now 50 minutes. In spite of the glitches, um, clearly this is an important topic that we need to spend more time in. And so thank you. And I will see, hopefully, others of you tonight at 7 for very last session on nutrition. So don't let that word scare you. Don't think, oh, she's just going to talk about like stop eating this and this. Don't worry. Um, we'll see you tonight. Take care, everyone.